The friends to lovers trope at its best might have to be Mulder and Scully from the X-Files, I would say. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Random Wednesdays here on OCG TV, the video of the week for the real supporters out there. I appreciate it. I appreciate all the comments during Random Wednesdays, and I hope you all will add to your favorites on today's topic as well if you can. In thinking about a topic about Random Wednesday today, the thing that stuck with me was the friends to lovers trope on TV shows, books, movies, and whatnot. Even in real life, it can be that way. Because what actually got me thinking about the idea was doing these Nick and Nicolandria videos from Love Island season 7 and how they're getting all this hate. And what made me really like them in the first place was the fact that they did go from friends to lovers. And the best kind of relationships to actually have a real shot long term where you're not eventually going to hate each other is to have a friendship with your loving. That is what I think. I don't think you necessarily have to go from friends to lovers. I think while you're dating, if you have a lot in common and you become good friends too as your relationship blooms, that works as well. But the whole friends to lovers thing in real life is definitely my favorite thing. Not to get too much into woo-woo astrology, but I am an Aquarius Venus, and that's just how we roll. We are known to be a little more distant, some would say, but we really like conversations. We really like to get into people's minds and get to know the person first before really diving in to the whole love thing. Well, today I wanted to think of some of my favorite, I guess, couples in fiction. Nicolandria in reality TV is a great couple to support because they are at the top of their game right now. Everyone's trying to tear them down because they're at the top, coming from a season of Love Island that did not have a lot of actual couples and a lot of chemistry. They did have that chemistry and they did go from friends to lovers. I'm really thinking about this off the top of my head today. It is Random Wednesday. I just wanted to have a topic. I like to just get on here and kind of flow. But the first couple that came to mind from a TV show that really shows the friends to lovers trope at its best might have to be Mulder and Scully from the X-Files, I would say. Because not only was it such a slow burn, but it was never the main point of the show, but they always had that chemistry. And they started off as co-workers, obviously, looking into the paranormal and tracking down if there's really aliens, or at least that's what Mulder was trying to make known. But the thing is, it took these two, I believe, at least 7 seasons to have even their first kiss. And by the time they had their first kiss, which was a New Year's Eve kiss at the dawn of a new century, the whole Y2K story could have been an apocalypse, they end up kissing, and it's a natural kiss. And I think that's why it worked. It was just, they had become so comfortable with each other by then that even though a lot of the fans at the time were certainly rooting for it to happen, it maybe never would have happened if it didn't take so long, but it still did happen. And I like this coupling and this friends to lovers trope because it did all happen so natural. They did it in a really good way. Once they did start to become more and more involved, I don't know if the writing stayed strong for them necessarily. I wouldn't say that, but I don't want to give any spoiler alerts if you've never seen X-Files or if you want to see it. But nonetheless, I still think the way they went about it is one of the more natural friends to lover tropes in a TV show that I could think of off the top of my head. A lot of sitcoms out there have done this, of course. The first one that comes to mind is from actual Friends, Monica and Chandler, another friends to lovers that came about in later seasons as well, after being what the show is actually called, Friends, for so long, then becoming lovers. I thought they end up being the best couple on that show. And why? Well, because they had the actual friendship first, which is why I say in real life, it's kind of true to life. I do think that helps a relationship. There was also Whitley and Dwayne from A Different World. One can maybe argue they started out as enemies because I don't think they really liked each other at first, but they definitely became friends before they became lovers. What I liked about this pairing on A Different World was how they had the whole will they or won't they for a few seasons, because they always obviously had chemistry, in my opinion. And then it was always a game of will they or won't they. They shared their first kiss a few seasons in, but it didn't really develop into more. It continued to be a slow burn where there was clearly something there between them, but it took them a few more seasons to really figure it out. So another great friends to lovers trope there. Moving away from comedies, though, I'm sure you could find some other cute ones, and I would like to know any of your guys' favorites in the comments of friends to lovers story, because I haven't seen that many TV shows. I mean, I've seen a lot. Let's be honest, I've seen a lot. But I would check out a different one that I've never seen before, depending on what the said show is. As for dramas, though, I don't actually like this show very much, to be honest. It used to get on my nerves watching it when I was younger, that being Dawson's Creek. But I feel like people would go to Joey and Pacey as being like the epitome of a friends to lovers story on a drama. It eventually became a love triangle, which is a whole different trope to discuss. But I do think it was still a good pairing, but that show gets on my nerves, I'm not gonna lie. If I were to think of another drama, and this is maybe more controversial, but I'm a big Buffy the Vampire Slayer fan, and the spin-off had Angel and Cordelia eventually have a little romance that I thought was also natural, maybe not quite as natural as Mulder and Scully, but I enjoyed the short-lived Angel and Cordelia pairing. I feel like that could be controversial. I don't know. I feel like at the time it certainly was. But they knew each other from Buffy. They moved over to the spinoff. The two characters worked together for years. And then finally start to see how much they actually have started to care for one another. Unfortunately, this was a short-lived romance because Joss Whedon is an ass clown, and he didn't like that Charisma Carpenter who played Cordelia got pregnant in real life, so he totally just tore down that character. Angel's the last couple seasons sucks because of Joss Whedon being an asshole instead of just trying to write good TV. However, if I were to talk about my favorite friends to lovers couple in TV, of course I have to go to a soap opera. Very niche. Don't know how many people will know this pairing, but Lucas and Sami on Days of Our Lives would be my personal favorite friends to lovers storyline. Although they kind of ran the gamut of different tropes, really, but they started off as schemers, and who doesn't like some scheming, especially on a soap opera? The story was that Lucas wanted his brother's girlfriend. He had a crush on her. And Sami wanted Lucas's brother. So they worked together to try and break up that couple, and had definitely had some success over the years in doing that. But then at some point, Lucas and Sami end up hooking up with each other. Sami gets pregnant. She tries to pass off the baby as Lucas's brother, so they kind of eventually become enemies too, so it kind of turns more into an enemies to lovers story. But after getting over the whole enemies arc in that storyline, they become friends again, trying to raise their kid together, and eventually do become lovers. Definitely one of my favorite soap pairings because of the friends to lovers trope, and it being a soap opera, being on for several years. They really do grow up as characters on the show over time, starting off much younger to become older and sometimes wiser. Not always, but those are some of my friends to lovers tropes that come to mind. I do want to hear some of your other answers in the comments, and maybe, just maybe, I'll check them out, or I'll talk about them next week if I have seen them before. Just a couple other topics for today's Random Wednesday, still kind of dating related. A lot of complaints out there about dating apps these days, and I can see why. Me personally, thankfully, fingers crossed, have never used a dating app. Not that I haven't met people online, but being an older millennial, I was able to meet people a little more natural on like message boards and stuff, where you have more things in common, actually. I'm glad I've never had to be a part of the dating app game, because I think I would hate that as well. Like I said earlier, being an Aqua Venus in astrology terms, I don't think it would work very well for me in actually getting to know a person the way I like to get to know a person. But some quotes from Olivia Dean on how dating apps really just make people seem disposable these days. We've talked about this in the past on the channel, about how these days everyone thinks they're going to find something better, I guess, because we live in a world where everything is at the touch of our fingertips. I do think a lot of people, instead of just wanting to commit to a relationship, because relationships are work, you do have to put in the work to keep them viable, to keep the sometimes roller coaster of life, but just also the relationship can be a roller coaster too. You got to keep a part of the ride by putting in work. But if you're always thinking, well, this probably ain't the guy, or this probably ain't the girl, so I need to move on to the next because I can always do better. And maybe you can. Like, if you're in a really shitty, toxic relationship, I do think you should move on if you can, especially if it's really, really toxic. I think you should move on as quickly as you possibly can. But if it's not a relationship like that, and if you do have a connection, maybe people need to start learning how to commit again. If they're looking for a relationship, some people are happier single, and that is great. But if you are single and you're eventually wanting to try and find your person, you gotta be less modern about it, I fear, because the modern way of people not really being seen as people. Like, I don't know, sometimes the way I hear all these stories or see all these stories online about dating, modern dating, and the opposite sex is not seeing the other as like a like just a human individual sometimes, to what it seems like. But, social media doesn't help. My last thing here is a video I saw on TikTok, which it did make me laugh, because so many of these podcasts for men, especially, and how to make their dating lives allegedly better, somebody was mocking using that advice when going on a date. And I thought it was funny, because I do think people actually try and do this these days because they listen to these podcasts.
Hey, how's it going? Okay, let's make this quick, because I actually don't have a lot of time on my hands. I'm actually a very busy man, a high value man. To start, I gotta say, you're a little older than I was expecting from your Tinder profile, which is a little unfortunate, because you females tend to lose most of your value from about the 25 to 30 range.
He's calling himself a high value man, and that is what a lot of these podcasts try and say that guys need to carry themselves as. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, but if you're doing it in a way to then put down the woman, and back in my day it was all about, the advice was always, you gotta nag the woman, you had to knock them off kilter, make them feel less valuable so you can feel more valuable. It's still kind of in the same vein of advice, but if you're really going on some of your first dates acting like this, I don't know what you really think is going to happen.
Do you know when to be silent? Do you know how to cook and clean? Can you submit to a high value man such as myself? So, what is your body count? 2? Oh my God. Wow, I didn't expect to go on a date with a hoe tonight.
See, again, I just feel like this advice is just more advice of how you're not seeing the other person as an actual person or a human, because you're just going off scripts, going off of what you have heard advice from other people, rather than just finding yourself, being yourself, and trying to discover another person. That's the only way to actually have a real solid relationship. And like I said earlier, if you want a long-term relationship, it's going to be work. But it can still be very meaningful if you develop that kind of relationship that, in my opinion, needs a lot of friendship in it, which is the whole point of today's subject. So I guess my advice, not that I think anybody needs to come to me for dating advice. Anytime I do one of these dating topics, I always say I am not the expert, but I still like to give logical advice. And I always think the logical advice is you need to find yourself. And it's not easy depending on your age, especially in your 20s. I think that's when people want to find themselves, or maybe even think they have. But nonetheless, I wish people would stop acting in a way because of advice they get online or because of a way they think they have to, instead of just being yourself. Now, there are certain things you do have to do, especially as a guy, in my opinion, to get that spark of attraction with a woman. I do think maybe, and I'm not going to give advice today because I don't feel like it, but that is something you maybe do need to do, maybe even the very first step, depending on how it's going. But sometimes you just have to try your best to catch a vibe, but not everyone is going to be attracted to you, but somebody out there will be. I really do believe that, because if you go out on the streets, at least in a big city, and you see couples, they're all very, very different and very, very unique. So I don't even know why I'm rambling on about this, but I know there is a lot of tension when it comes to dating these days, and I don't have all the answers, but I don't think people need to be perpetually online. Certainly not on dating apps, as we discussed earlier, because people see others as disposable. I would like to say friendship first, but that doesn't always work either, because then you can easily end up in the friend zone. I guess maybe let's hear some comments about this. Here's some comments about, if you're dating right now, if you're not taken, if you're not married, if you're in the dating game, how is it out there for you right now? I would like to know in the comments. If you are taken, you are married or whatever, what was your approach to dating your significant other? How did that all come about? And maybe next week for Random Wednesday, we will discuss this further. And then someday in the future, I do want to go over some more love tropes on TV shows, like Enemies to Lovers, like Forbidden Love, which is maybe my actual favorite when it comes to TV shows. But that's all for today. Thanks for listening to me ramble.